A firefighter was beaten and left to die in an alley, by her own fire chief. The man who found her? A mafia boss with every reason to walk away. But when she revealed the truth about a $47 million arson conspiracy, he broke his most sacred rule. What happened next destroyed an entire fire department and shocked a city. Carlo Pellegrini was walking alone through the warehouse district, blood still on his knuckles from a brutal night, when he heard it. Desperate, shallow gasps. He turned the corner and froze. There, slumped against a brick wall, a firefighter in full gear, bleeding, broken, barely breathing. Her own department had tried to murder her. And now Carlo faced an impossible choice: save her and risk everything he'd built, or let corruption win again, just like it did when his brother died. Before we dive into this story, tell me where you're watching from and what time is it. Also don't forget to smash that subscribe button, like and share. Carlo Pellegrini was not having a good night. The kind of night where everything that could go wrong did. 2 of his warehouses torched. A territory war with the Gallo family escalating into violence. His second-in-command questioning his leadership. Blood still on his knuckles from personally handling the Gallo lieutenant who disrespected him. And to top it all off, a rage burning in his chest that felt like it would consume him from the inside out. He needed air, space, a moment away from the constant pressure of being the man everyone feared and depended on. So he did something he rarely did. He walked alone. No bodyguards, no driver, no entourage, just Carlo Pellegrini in the empty streets of the warehouse district. At midnight. The cool night air hit his face as he moved through the shadows, hands deep in his coat pockets. This part of town was quiet. Too quiet for most people, but Carlo liked it that way. The smell of smoke from the earlier fires still lingered, mixing with the industrial stench of oil and metal. No noise, no demands, just the sound of his footsteps echoing off brick walls. Then he heard something faint, desperate, a sound that made his trained instinct snap to attention. Shallow gasps, like someone struggling to breathe. Carlo stopped, his body going rigid. Every nerve in his body told him to keep walking, to mind his own business. He built his empire on one rule: never involve civilians in his world, never. Emergency services meant attention, investigations, federal scrutiny, the kind of exposure that could destroy everything he'd worked for. But the gasping got weaker, more desperate, and Carlo found his feet moving before his brain could stop them. He turned the corner into a narrow alley. And that's when he saw her. A woman in firefighter gear slumped against a dumpster like a discarded rag doll. Her face was pale, too pale. Blood pooled beneath her, dark and spreading. Her eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow and ragged. She'd been beaten badly. Her turnout coat was torn open. Her helmet lay cracked beside her and her hand was pressed weakly against her skull where blood seeped through her fingers. Smoke inhalation had clearly damaged her lungs, each breath a struggle. Carlo's jaw clenched. He should walk away. Should pretend he never saw this. Firefighters got hurt all the time in this city. It wasn't his problem. Wasn't his responsibility. But something about the way she looked, so broken, so alone, made him hesitate. He'd made a vow years ago: never involve civilians in his operations. It was how he stayed invisible, how he kept his empire running, how he protected his people. Getting mixed up with a dying firefighter was asking for trouble, begging for it. The woman's eyes flickered, her lips moved. Help. The word came out barely a whisper, so weak Carlo almost missed it. Her head tilted toward him, and for a split second, their eyes met. She wasn't begging, wasn't pleading, just looking at him with the kind of acceptance that said she knew she was dying, that she'd made peace with it. And somehow that made it worse. Carlo cursed under his breath. Loud, sharp, angry at himself for even hesitating. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the emergency dial. One call, anonymous. Then he could disappear before anyone arrived. Simple, clean. But as he looked at the woman again, something inside him shifted. She wasn't just a firefighter. She was someone's daughter. Maybe someone's sister. Someone who'd probably spent her whole life running into burning buildings to save people in a city that punished heroes for their courage. Just like his brother Dante had been punished for being in the wrong building when corrupt firefighters decided some lives weren't worth saving. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Can't, she choked out. Can't trust you. Carlo laughed bitterly. Lady, if I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. I've got better things to do than watch a firefighter bleed out. He pressed his hand over hers, applying pressure to the wound on her head. She gasped in pain, her body going rigid. Who did this to you? Carlo demanded. Who? Her eyes filled with tears, not from pain, from something darker. My own department, she whispered, her voice breaking. Deputy Chief Wade. Fire Chief Kessler. After the fire tonight. Set me up. Been investigating arson for profit. They found out. Wade beat me. Kessler watched. Tried to silence me. The words hit Carlo like a punch. What? Warehouse fires, she gasped, her voice fading. Not accidents. Arson. Insurance fraud. Chief Kessler, Wade, they're working with an arsonist. Torching buildings for payouts. I had evidence. They beat me after the fire tonight, left me to die from the smoke damage and the beating. Carlo's mind raced. A firefighter investigating corruption, set up by her own chiefs, beaten and left to die in an alley. This wasn't just an attack. This was an execution. And whoever ordered it had power, enough power to make a firefighter disappear without questions. The same kind of corrupt firefighters who let his brother Dante die. How many others? Carlo asked urgently. How many are involved? She tried to answer, but her eyes started rolling back. No. Carlo grabbed her face, forcing her to focus on him. Stay with me. You don't get to die yet. Not until you tell me who did this. Names. I need names. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her body was shutting down, lungs failing from the smoke damage and internal bleeding. Carlo looked around the empty alley. No witnesses, no cameras, just him and a dying firefighter who'd been betrayed by the people sworn to protect the city. He had two choices. Walk away, pretend this never happened. Keep his vow to stay away from civilians. Protect his empire, protect his people. Or break that vow, risk everything, and save someone who represented everything he'd spent his life avoiding. Carlo closed his eyes. Thought of all the reasons he should leave. All the ways this could destroy him. Then he thought of something else. His younger brother Dante, dead at 14 in an apartment fire where corrupt firefighters delayed response for 28 minutes because someone paid them to let the building burn. Because corruption protected the criminals who profited from death. Because nobody with power gave a damn about one kid from the streets. Carlo's eyes snapped open, rage burning through him like fire. He scooped the woman into his arms. She was light, too light, her head lolled against his chest, her breathing barely there, each breath a wheeze. You're not dying tonight, Carlo said through clenched teeth. Not like this. Not because some corrupt chiefs decided you were expendable. He carried her out of the alley, his mind already calculating his next moves. He couldn't take her to a hospital. The corrupt firefighters would find her, finish what they started. He needed someone he could trust. Someone who owed him enough to ask no questions. Dr. Helena Vasquez. Carlo pulled out his phone with one hand while cradling the dying firefighter with the other. The call connected on the first ring. I need you at the private facility, Carlo said, his voice cold and commanding. Now. Trauma case. Smoke inhalation, head trauma, internal bleeding. And Helena, no records. No one can know she's there. There was a pause on the other end. Carlo, what have you gotten yourself into? Just be ready when I arrive. 20 minutes, he said and ended the call. The woman in his arms made a weak sound, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment. Why? She whispered. Why are you helping me? Carlo's expression darkened, memories of Dante's funeral flooding back, the rage he'd felt knowing corrupt firefighters had killed his brother as surely as if they'd pulled a trigger. Because someone should have saved my brother when corrupt firefighters like yours left him to die, Carlo said quietly. And I'll be damned if I let it happen again. The woman's eyes closed, her breathing growing shallower. Carlo walked faster, carrying her through the dark streets toward the one place the corrupt fire chiefs would never think to look. His own private medical facility, hidden in plain sight in a legitimate medical building he owned. Tonight, Carlo Pellegrini was breaking every rule he'd ever made. And he didn't care. Because sometimes the only way to get justice was to become the kind of man the system feared. Carlo burst through the doors of the medical facility carrying Amy Blackson in his arms, her blood soaking through his coat. Dr. Helena Vasquez was already there, her surgical team prepped and waiting in the sterile operating room on the 3rd floor. "Get her on the table," Helena commanded, her voice sharp and professional. She was one of the few people who never questioned Carlo's decisions, who understood that in his world, questions could get you killed. Carlo laid Amy down gently on the operating table. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, she looked worse than he'd thought. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor, her lips were blue from oxygen deprivation, and the wound on her head was still bleeding despite the pressure he'd applied. Helena immediately began her assessment, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Smoke inhalation, severe. Punctured lung, definitely. Skull fracture, possible internal bleeding. She looked up at Carlo, her expression grave. "This is bad. Really bad. I'm not sure I can save her." "You will," Carlo said flatly. "It wasn't a request." Helena met his eyes for a moment, then nodded. "Everyone out. Now. We're operating immediately." Carlo stepped back as the surgical team swarmed around Amy. Nurses connected 4 lines, administered medications, placed an oxygen mask over her face. Helena barked orders, her hands already working to cut away the damaged turnout coat, exposing the extent of Amy's injuries. The operating room doors swung shut, leaving Carlo standing alone in the sterile hallway. Through the observation window, he could see Helena working frantically, her team moving in synchronized precision around the dying firefighter. Carlo pulled out his phone and made another call. "Lucia, I need you at the facility. Now." "On my way," came the immediate response from Lucia Torrente, his most trusted operative. Then Carlo paced back and forth, his expensive shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Blood still stained his hands, Amy's blood, and he couldn't bring himself to wash it off. Not yet. Not until he knew if she would survive. Hours crawled by. 2 hours became 3. 3 became 4. When Lucia arrived, Carlo gave her specific instructions. Find out everything about Amy Blackson. Find out who wanted her dead. And most importantly, find out where she lived and what evidence she had hidden there. But wait for his signal before retrieving anything. Then he waited. The memories came flooding back, unbidden and unwelcome. Dante's funeral. His brother's small casket. The rage Carlo had felt learning the truth, that firefighters had been paid to delay their response, that his brother had died gasping for air while corrupt officials counted their blood money. He'd sworn that day at Dante's grave that he would never let corruption go unpunished. That he would never be powerless again. And now, 14 years later, he was watching another person fight for their life because the same kind of corruption had marked them for death. At the 6-hour mark, the operating room doors finally opened. Helena emerged, her surgical mask pulled down, exhaustion written across her face. Blood stained her scrubs. Carlo stopped pacing, his entire body tensing. "Is she alive?" Helena pulled off her surgical gloves slowly. "Barely. I managed to repair the punctured lung, stop the internal bleeding, and relieve the pressure on her brain from the skull fracture. But Carlo, the smoke inhalation damage is extensive. Her lungs are compromised. The next 48 hours are critical. If she develops pneumonia or if there's brain swelling I didn't catch, she won't make it." "But she's alive," Carlo said, his voice rough. "For now," Helena confirmed. "She's in recovery. Unconscious. It'll be at least 12 hours before she wakes up, if she wakes up." Carlo moved past Helena toward the recovery room. Through the small window, he could see Amy lying motionless on the bed, tubes and wires connected to her body, machines monitoring her every breath. She looked small. Fragile. Nothing like the firefighter who'd run into burning buildings to save strangers. "I'll stay," Carlo said quietly. Helena put a hand on his shoulder. "Carlo, what have you gotten yourself into?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. All he knew was that Amy Blackson wasn't going to die. Not on his watch. Not like Dante. Carlo pulled a chair up beside Amy's bed and sat down, his eyes never leaving her pale face. Somewhere in this city, corrupt fire chiefs thought they'd gotten away with murder. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 18 hours later, Amy Blackson's eyes opened. The first thing she saw was the white ceiling, unfamiliar and sterile. The second thing she felt was pain, radiating through her skull, her chest, her entire body. The third thing she noticed was the man sitting beside her bed. Carlo Pellegrini. Amy's heart rate spiked immediately, the monitor beside her bed beeping frantically. She tried to sit up, tried to move, but her body refused to cooperate. Tubes and wires kept her tethered to machines, and every movement sent fresh waves of agony through her broken ribs. "Easy," Carlo said, his voice low and calm. "You're safe. The surgery was successful, but you need to stay still." "Safe." Amy's voice came out as a hoarse whisper, her throat raw from the breathing tube. "You're Carlo Pellegrini. I'm not safe." Carlo leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. I'm the one who saved your life, remember? Carried you out of that alley, got you a surgeon who didn't ask questions, kept you hidden for almost a day while you recovered." Amy's mind raced, trying to piece together fragmented memories. The warehouse fire. Wade's face twisted with rage. The beating. Kessler standing there, watching. The alley. And then Carlo, kneeling beside her, his hands covered in her blood. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me?" "Because you said your own department tried to kill you," Carlo replied. "I want to know why." Amy closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. The betrayal was still fresh, still raw. "Deputy Chief Wade. He beat me. Fire Chief Kessler watched, made sure I'd die. They did it after I confronted Wade about falsified inspection reports." Carlo leaned forward, his attention sharpening. "What reports?" "The warehouse that burned last night," Amy said, her voice gaining strength despite the pain. "It wasn't an accident. The inspection records were forged. Someone signed off on safety certifications for a building that should have been condemned. When I started digging, I found a pattern. 23 fires over the last 3 years, all in buildings with falsified inspections, all resulting in massive insurance payouts." Carlo's jaw clenched. 23 fires. Including the 2 warehouses that burned in my district this week. Amy opened her eyes, confusion flickering across her face. "Your warehouses? You think this is connected to you?" "I know it is," Carlo said coldly. "Someone's been torching buildings in my territory for months. I thought it was the Gallo family trying to push me out. But if there's a corruption network running arson for insurance fraud, then maybe I wasn't the target. Maybe I was just collateral damage." Amy tried to process this information through the fog of pain medication. "I had evidence," she said urgently. "USB drive hidden in my apartment. Forged documents, recordings of Wade's phone conversations, photographs of Chief Kessler meeting with a known arsonist named Kenneth Hartley. If Wade knows I'm alive, he'll destroy everything." "He doesn't know you're alive," Carlo assured her. "At least not yet. But he will eventually. Men like that always find out." "Then I need to get that evidence to someone I can trust," Amy said, trying again to sit up. Pain exploded through her chest, and she gasped, collapsing back against the pillows. "You're not going anywhere," Carlo said firmly. "You have a punctured lung, a skull fracture, and enough internal damage that standing up would probably kill you. You'll be in this bed for at least a week." Amy stared at him, frustration and fear warring in her expression. "Then the evidence is gone. Wade will find it, destroy it, and everyone he's working with walks free. All those fires, all those people who lost everything, and nobody pays." Carlo pulled out his phone. "What's your address?" Amy hesitated, suspicion crossing her face. "Why?" "Because I'm sending someone to get your evidence before Wade does," Carlo said. "I have people who are very good at retrieving things quietly. But I need to know where to send them and exactly where you hid that USB drive." Amy studied his face, searching for deception, for the trap she knew had to be coming. But all she saw was cold determination and something else, something that looked almost like rage. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again. "What do you care about corrupt firefighters?" Carlo's expression darkened, old pain flickering in his eyes. "Because corrupt firefighters killed my brother when he was 14 years old. They delayed response to his building fire for 28 minutes because someone paid them to let it burn. He died gasping for air while they counted their blood money." The words hung heavy in the sterile air. Amy saw the truth in his eyes, the wound that had never healed. My apartment is 247 Riverside, Unit 6C, she said quietly. The USB drive is taped behind the bathroom mirror. There's also a fireproof box under my bed with hard copies of everything. Carlo was already typing a message. My operative will have it within the hour. And then what? Amy asked. Even with the evidence, who do I give it to? Wade has connections throughout the department. Kessler is the fire chief. For all I know, half the brass is involved. Carlo met her eyes, and for the first time, Amy saw something almost like respect in his gaze. Then we find someone who isn't involved, he said. And we burn their whole corrupt empire to the ground. Carlo stood and walked to the window, his back to Amy. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared out at the city skyline bathed in the orange glow of streetlights. When he finally spoke, his voice was harder than steel. My brother Dante was 14 when he died. Smart kid. Good kid. The kind who actually believed the system would protect him. Carlo's hands clenched into fists. We lived in one of those buildings in the Bronson district, the kind slumlords buy up for nothing, let them rot, then torch them for insurance money. Amy listened, her breathing shallow, each word hitting her like a physical blow. The fire started just after midnight. Electrical, they said later. But I knew better. I was in prison at the time, couldn't protect him, couldn't do anything but wait for news. Carlo turned to face her, and Amy saw rage burning in his eyes. The fire department received the call at 12:14 a.m. They didn't arrive until 12:42. 28 minutes. You know what happens to someone trapped in a burning building for 28 minutes? Amy's throat tightened. She knew. Every firefighter knew. By the time they pulled Dante out, he died from smoke inhalation. Lungs completely destroyed. They said he'd been calling for help, banging on the window, until he couldn't anymore. Carlo's voice cracked slightly, the only sign of emotion he allowed himself. I found out later the building owner, Vincent Hargrove, had been paying Fire Battalion Chief Louis Kearney and 3 other firefighters to delay response to fires in buildings he wanted gone. They'd done it 6 times before Dante. They did it 3 times after. My God, Amy whispered. I couldn't prove it then. I was a criminal, my word meant nothing. Kearney retired with full pension. The other firefighters got promoted. Hargrove collected his insurance money and bought more buildings. Carlo moved back to the chair beside her bed. I swore at Dante's grave that I would never let corruption like that go unpunished. That I would document everything, know everything, so I'd never be powerless again. Amy saw the truth in his eyes, the wound that had shaped him into the man he'd become. So when you found me in that alley, I saw my brother, Carlo finished quietly. Someone left to die because corrupt officials decided their money was worth more than a life. Amy felt tears burning her eyes again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to him. Don't be sorry, Carlo said flatly. Be angry. And help me make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. He pulled out a tablet from the bag beside his chair and handed it to Amy. On the screen were spreadsheets, maps, detailed notes. For the last 5 years, I've been documenting every fire in this city. Response times, building ownership, insurance claims, which firefighters responded, how long it took them to arrive. I started doing it as insurance, to know if rivals were using arson against my operations. But patterns emerged. Amy scrolled through the data, her eyes widening. This is incredibly detailed. You've documented over 300 fires. 347, Carlo corrected. And 23 of them match the pattern you described. Falsified inspections, delayed responses, massive insurance payouts, same group of firefighters on scene. Amy's hands trembled as she cross-referenced the data with her own memories. Chief Kessler was on scene for 18 of these. Deputy Chief Wade for 16. And look here, Kenneth Hartley was arrested near 4 of these fire locations but never charged. Because Kessler and Wade made sure he wasn't, Carlo said. They're partners. Hartley sets the fires, Kessler and Wade ensure the investigations go nowhere, and they all split the insurance money. Amy looked up at him, realization dawning. If we combine your data with my evidence, we have enough to prove the conspiracy. 3 years of documented fraud, connections between all the players, financial records. Exactly, Carlo said. Which is why I'm proposing we work together. You have the evidence. I have the resources, the protection, and the documentation to back it up. Together, we expose everyone involved. Amy hesitated, fear and doubt warring in her expression. You're a criminal. A mafia boss. If I work with you, I'm destroying any credibility I have left. You don't have any credibility left, Carlo said bluntly. Wade and Kessler made sure of that when they tried to kill you. Right now, you're a dead woman who happened to survive. If you go back into the system, they'll finish what they started. Your only chance is to stay dead until we have enough evidence to bury them so completely they can't fight back. Amy closed her eyes, knowing he was right, hating that he was right. She'd spent her entire career believing in the system, trusting that the fire department was noble, that her brothers and sisters in service would protect her. Wade had beaten her and Kessler had watched her left to die in an alley. If we do this, Amy said, opening her eyes, we do it my way. No one else gets hurt. We expose the corruption, but we don't become the monsters we're fighting. Carlo's expression didn't change. I can't promise we won't have to get our hands dirty. These people tried to murder you. They won't go quietly. Then we make sure we have so much evidence, so much public attention, that they can't touch us without destroying themselves, Amy countered. Carlo studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Agreed. We go public, massive exposure, force federal intervention before they can retaliate. Agreed, Amy whispered. Carlo extended his hand. Amy stared at it, knowing that shaking it meant crossing a line she could never uncross. Trusting a criminal. Allying with the enemy. But Wade and Kessler had already crossed that line when they decided her life was worthless. Amy reached out and shook Carlo's hand. Let's burn their empire to the ground. Amy took a shallow breath, wincing as pain radiated through her damaged ribs. The conspiracy goes deeper than just Kessler and Wade. They've built an entire operation. Carlo pulled his chair closer, his full attention locked on her. Tell me everything. It started 3 years ago, as far as I can tell, Amy began, her voice gaining strength despite her weakness. Fire Chief Raymond Kessler approached Deputy Chief Franklin Wade with a proposition. Kessler had connections to insurance investigators who could push claims through without thorough examination. Wade had access to inspection records and could falsify safety certifications. All they needed was someone to actually set the fires. Kenneth Hartley, Carlo said. Exactly. Hartley's a career arsonist, been arrested 4 times but never convicted. Kessler made sure of that, buried evidence, intimidated witnesses, lost paperwork. In exchange, Hartley works exclusively for them. Amy's hands trembled as she continued. They target buildings that are struggling financially, approach the owners with an offer. We'll torch your building, you collect the insurance money, and we take 40% of the payout. Carlo's expression darkened. 40%. How much are we talking? Based on what I documented, at least 23 fires over 3 years. Insurance payouts ranging from $1 million to $6 million per fire. Conservative estimate, they've collected $47 million. $47 million, Carlo repeated, his voice deadly quiet. And how many people died in those fires? Amy's eyes filled with tears. 3 confirmed deaths. A homeless man in a warehouse fire. A security guard who wouldn't evacuate. And a teenage girl who lived in an apartment building they torched. Her voice broke. Her name was Sofia Reyes. She was 16. Carlo's jaw clenched so hard Amy could see the muscle twitching. Another young person dead because corrupt firefighters valued money over lives. Just like Dante. The evidence in your apartment, Carlo said. What exactly do you have? Amy forced herself to focus, to push past the grief and rage. USB drive contains 3 years of forged inspection reports, all with Kessler's and Wade's signatures. I cross-referenced them with actual building conditions, proved they were falsified. There are also financial records I obtained from a source inside the insurance company, showing unusual payment patterns to shell companies that trace back to Kessler and Wade. What else? Audio recordings. I installed a recording device in the station break room where Wade often takes calls 6 months ago. I have him discussing upcoming projects with Kessler on those calls, talking about which buildings to target next, coordinating with Hartley. 37 hours of recorded conversations. Carlo's eyes gleamed with cold satisfaction. That's enough to bury them. There's more, Amy continued. Photographs. I followed Kessler for 2 months on my off days, documented every time he met with Hartley. Coffee shops, parking garages, abandoned buildings. 12 meetings, all photographed with date and time stamps. I also have photos of Wade meeting with building owners before their properties burned. And this is all in your apartment? USB drive behind the bathroom mirror. Fireproof box under my bed with hard copies of everything, backup drives, handwritten notes cross-referencing all the data. Amy's voice turned urgent. Carlo, if Wade suspects I'm alive, that's the first place he'll look. He needs to destroy that evidence before anyone finds it. Carlo was already pulling out his phone. Lucia, I need you for an extraction. High priority, immediate timeline. Amy heard a woman's voice on the other end, sharp and professional. Location. 247, Riverside Drive, Unit 6C. Target items, USB drive behind bathroom mirror, fireproof box under the bed. Additional sweep for any other documentation or recording devices. Carlo glanced at Amy. Security measures? Standard apartment lock, no alarm system. But Wade might have someone watching the building. Carlo relayed the information. Lucia, treat this as hostile surveillance. If you encounter anyone, do not engage, extract and evade. We need this evidence clean, no complications. Understood. ETA 20 minutes. Carlo ended the call and looked at Amy. Lucia Torrente is the best operative I have. Former military intelligence, expert in infiltration and extraction. If the evidence is there, she'll get it. And if Wade's people are already there? Amy asked, fear creeping into her voice. Then Lucia will know before she goes in, and we'll adjust, Carlo said calmly. But I don't think Wade knows you're alive yet. He left you in that alley to die. As far as he knows, your body should still be there, or in the morgue by now. Amy shuddered at the thought. When he realizes I'm missing. He'll panic, Carlo finished. Which is exactly what we want. Panicked men make mistakes. They get sloppy, desperate. That's when we strike. 25 minutes crawled by in tense silence. Amy drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain medication pulling her under. Carlo sat motionless, his phone in his hand, waiting. Finally, the phone buzzed. Package secured, Lucia's voice came through. USB drive, fireproof box, plus a laptop I found hidden in the closet. No hostile contact, building was clear. Currently en route to your location. Carlo allowed himself a small smile. Good work. ETA? 15 minutes. Carlo pocketed his phone and looked at Amy, who jerked awake at the sound of Lucia's voice. We have your evidence. All of it. Now comes the hard part. What's the hard part? Amy asked weakly. Carlo's expression turned grim. Staying alive long enough to use it. Lucia Torrente arrived 12 minutes later with Amy's evidence secured in a tactical bag. She was lean, sharp-eyed, and moved with the precision of someone trained to kill efficiently. She handed the bag to Carlo without a word, then took up position by the window, her hand resting on the concealed weapon at her hip. We have company, she said quietly. 3 vehicles, parking across the street. 9 individuals, mixed civilian clothes and fire department gear. 2 carrying concealed weapons, maybe more. Carlo's expression didn't change, but his entire body went rigid. How did they find us? Emergency Services Database, Lucia said, pulling up her tablet. I've been monitoring local channels. Someone ran a search for Amy Blackson through the EMS system 30 minutes ago, flagged any hospital admissions matching her description. This building is registered as a medical facility. If they're thorough enough, they connected the dots. Amy struggled to sit up in bed, panic flooding through her. Wade. He has access to every emergency services database in the city. Then he knows you're alive, Carlo said coldly. He turned to Lucia. Security status? 4 of our people positioned on each floor, 2 at each entrance, sniper teams on the roof across the street. We're fortified, but if this turns into a firefight, we'll have federal attention within minutes. That's exactly what Wade is counting on, Carlos said. He can't storm the building, so he'll force us into a position where we either surrender Amy or engage in a shootout that brings every law enforcement agency in the city down on us. Through the window, they watched as 9 figures emerged from the vehicles. Fire Chief Raymond Kessler in full uniform, Deputy Chief Franklin Wade beside him, 4 firefighters in department gear, and 2 men in civilian clothes who moved with the predatory awareness of career criminals. In the center of the group, unmistakable even from a distance, was Kenneth Hartley. They were wheeling a medical gurney, carrying paramedic equipment, playing the part of a legitimate medical transfer team. "They're coming in," Lucia said, her hand tightening on her weapon. Carlo's phone buzzed. "Unknown number." He answered, putting it on speaker. "Pellegrini." Wade's voice came through, smooth and confident. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Deputy Chief Wade," Carlo said calmly. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play games. We tracked firefighter Amy Blackson to your facility. She requires immediate medical evaluation and transfer to Metro General Hospital. We're here to collect her." "There's no one here by that name," Carlo lied smoothly. Wade's voice hardened. "We have authorization from Fire Chief Kessler to retrieve our injured colleague. You're harboring someone who needs medical attention. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll be forced to involve police, federal authorities, and media. Is that really the attention you want on your facility?" Carlo met Amy's terrified eyes. She shook her head frantically, mouthing the words, "Don't let them take me." "Your concern for your colleague is touching," Carlo said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But as I said, there's no one here by that name. Perhaps you have the wrong address." Through the window, they watched Wade confer with Kessler and Hartley. The 2 armed criminals flanked the entrance to the building. The firefighters fanned out, surrounding the perimeter. Wade's voice came back harder, more threatening. "Pellegrini, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Release Amy Blackson for medical evaluation, or I make 1 phone call and have 40 firefighters, 20 police officers, and federal agents surrounding your building within 20 minutes. How long do you think your operation survives that kind of scrutiny?" Carlo's jaw clenched. Wade had him cornered. If Carlo admitted Amy was here, they'd take her and finish what they started. If he refused, Wade would bring the full force of emergency services down on the building, exposing Carlo's entire operation. "You're threatening to call in the entire fire department and police force to extract 1 injured firefighter?" Carlo said carefully. "That seems excessive. Unless this isn't really about medical care at all." Silence on the other end. Carlo had struck a nerve. "Sounds to me like you're desperate to get to Amy Blackson before she can tell people what you did," Carlo continued. "Sounds like you tried to kill her once, and now you need to finish the job." "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Wade snarled. "That woman is a traitor to the department, she's delusional, and she's stolen classified fire department documents. We're here to bring her in for questioning about corruption allegations she's been making. If you're protecting her, you're obstructing a departmental investigation." "And if I'm not protecting her," Carlo countered, "then you're surrounding a private medical facility with armed men for no reason. That sounds like harassment, Deputy Chief." Carlo could hear Wade breathing hard on the other end. Outside, Kessler was on his own phone, clearly calling for backup. "Last chance, Pellegrini," Wade said. "Give us Amy Blackson, or we come in and take her. And if my men have to force entry into your facility, I can't guarantee what happens to anyone who gets in our way." It was a direct threat. Wade was willing to escalate to violence. Carlo looked at Lucia, who nodded grimly. Their security team was ready, but a firefight would destroy everything Carlo had built. His invisibility, his carefully maintained distance from law enforcement, all of it would burn. But looking at Amy, pale and terrified in that hospital bed, Carlo saw Dante's face. Saw his brother gasping for air while corrupt firefighters counted their blood money. "Then I guess we're doing this the hard way," Carlo said, and ended the call. Outside, Wade lowered his phone. Even from this distance, Carlo could see the rage on his face. Kessler was barking orders. The armed men checked their weapons. The siege had begun. Carlo stood at the window, watching Wade's team take positions around the building. His mind raced through options, calculating outcomes, weighing risks. A firefight would be suicide. Surrender would be murder. There was only one play left. Lucia, Carlo said quietly. Set up the live stream. Now. Lucia's eyes widened slightly, the only sign of surprise she allowed herself. You're sure about this? We're out of options. If Wade takes Amy, she's dead. If we fight, we're dead. The only way we survive is if the whole world is watching. Carlo pulled out his phone and opened his secure social media accounts with over 2 million followers built through years of carefully cultivated public presence. We go public before they can silence us. Amy struggled to speak from her bed. Carlo, if you do this, you're exposing yourself. Everything you've built. Means nothing if we're dead, Carlo interrupted. He turned to Lucia. Send the evidence to every major news outlet in the city. CNN, local news, the Tribune, the Herald, all of them. Send it to the FBI field office, the U.S. Attorney, the Federal Arson Task Force. Send it everywhere, simultaneously. Lucia was already typing furiously on her tablet, uploading files to encrypted email accounts. Evidence packets deploying now. 47 recipients, all major media and federal agencies. Carlo positioned his phone to capture both himself and the window overlooking the street where Wade's team waited. He went live. My name is Carlo Pellegrini, he said, his voice clear and steady. And I'm about to expose a corruption conspiracy involving Fire Chief Raymond Kessler, Deputy Chief Franklin Wade, and arsonist Kenneth Hartley that has resulted in $47 million in insurance fraud and at least 3 deaths. Within seconds, viewers started flooding in. Hundreds, then thousands. Right now, outside this building, Fire Chief Kessler and Deputy Chief Wade are attempting to murder firefighter Amy Blackson, who discovered their conspiracy and gathered evidence against them. Carlo turned the camera to show the armed men outside. They beat her and left her to die less than 2 days ago. She survived. Now they're here to finish what they started. The viewer count exploded. 10,000. 20,000. Carlo turned the camera to Amy in her hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting her to machines, her face bruised and battered. This is Amy Blackson, the firefighter they tried to murder. Amy, tell them what happened. Amy's voice was weak but clear. Deputy Chief Wade beat me unconscious while Fire Chief Kessler watched after I confronted them about falsifying fire inspection reports. They've been orchestrating arsons for insurance payouts for 3 years. They work with Kenneth Hartley, who sets the fires. I have evidence. Recordings, photographs, forged documents. They're here to kill me before I can expose them. 50,000 viewers. The comments section exploded with shock and outrage. Outside, Wade was screaming into his phone. He'd seen the live stream. Carlo smiled grimly. The evidence is being released to federal authorities and news media as we speak, Carlo announced to the camera. 3 years of documented arsons, 23 fires, 47 million in fraud, financial records, audio recordings of Deputy Chief Wade planning arsons, photographs of Chief Kessler meeting with arsonist Kenneth Hartley. A new vehicle pulled up to the scene. Carlo's heart rate spiked, expecting more reinforcements for Wade. But the woman who stepped out wore a battalion chief uniform with Brennan stitched across the chest. Patricia Brennan. Carlo knew the name. Everyone in the city knew Patricia Brennan, the only battalion chief who'd ever testified against corruption in the department, who'd survived 3 internal investigations designed to destroy her career, who had a reputation for absolute integrity. Brennan took one look at the armed standoff, at Kessler and Wade's team, and her expression hardened. She pulled out her radio. This is Battalion Chief Brennan. I need immediate backup at 847 Medical Plaza, officer safety situation, multiple armed individuals, potential hostage scenario. Wade rushed toward her. Chief Brennan, this doesn't concern you. This is a departmental matter. Deputy Chief Wade, why are you surrounding a medical facility with armed men? Brennan demanded, her voice carrying clearly. And why is there a live stream with over 100,000 viewers showing firefighter Amy Blackson claiming you tried to murder her? Wade's face went pale. That woman is delusional, I've just received an evidence packet from federal sources, Brennan interrupted, holding up her phone. Forged inspection reports with your signature and Chief Kessler's. Audio recordings. Photographs. And I'm watching Chief Kessler standing next to Kenneth Hartley, a known arsonist. Her voice turned to ice. What the hell have you done? Carlo seized the moment. Battalion Chief Brennan, I'm Carlo Pellegrini. I have comprehensive evidence of a 3-year arson conspiracy involving Chief Kessler, Deputy Chief Wade, and 6 other firefighters. Amy Blackson is under my protection as a witness. I'm willing to turn over all evidence to federal authorities if you can guarantee her safety. Brennan looked at the camera, at Carlo in the window, at the armed standoff. She made her decision in seconds. Federal Arson Task Force is being notified now, she said clearly. Nobody moves until they arrive. Wade Kessler, if you have any wisdom left, you'll stand down immediately. Sirens wailed in the distance. Not fire trucks. Federal vehicles. News vans began arriving, satellite dishes deploying, cameras pointing at the scene. The live stream hit 200,000 viewers. Wade's empire was burning, and the whole world was watching. Kenneth Hartley cracked first. Carlo saw it happen through the window. Hartley, realizing the live stream had exposed everything, realizing federal agents were minutes away, made the panicked decision of a cornered animal. He pulled a weapon from inside his jacket, a .45 caliber pistol, and pointed it at Battalion Chief Brennan. Nobody moves. Hartley screamed. This is all lies, all of it. I'm not going to prison for these corrupt. One of Carlo's rooftop snipers took the shot. The bullet struck Hartley's shoulder, spinning him around, the pistol clattering to the pavement. Chaos erupted. The 2 armed criminals with Wade's team drew weapons. Carlo's security team emerged from cover, guns raised. Firefighters scattered. News cameras captured everything. Stand down. Brennan screamed. Everyone stand down. But it was too late. One of the armed criminals fired at the building. The bullet shattered a window 3 floors below Carlo's position. Return fire came instantly from Carlo's team. The criminal went down, clutching his leg. The livestream viewer count hit 250,000. People were watching an armed confrontation in real time. Then the federal vehicles arrived. 3 black SUVs screamed into the scene, and a tactical team poured out, agents in full gear with FBI Arson Task Force emblazoned across their vests. Leading them was a man in his 50s with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades taking down criminals. Federal Agent Dominic Castellano. His voice boomed. Everyone drop your weapons. Now. The remaining armed criminal dropped his pistol immediately. Carlo's security team held their positions but lowered their weapons slightly. Hartley lay on the ground, screaming in pain, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Wade and Kessler exchanged one look, then bolted. They ran toward one of their vehicles, but federal agents cut them off, tackling Wade to the ground. Kessler made it to his car, but Lucia Torrente was faster. She'd left the building through a side entrance and intercepted him, sweeping his legs out from under him with brutal efficiency. Kessler hit the pavement hard, Lucia's knee on his back, her weapon pressed to his skull. Don't move, she said coldly. Federal agents swarmed the scene, securing suspects, confiscating weapons, establishing a perimeter. News cameras caught everything. Agent Castellano strode toward the building entrance, speaking into his radio. Carlo ended the live stream at 320,000 viewers and went downstairs to meet him. Carlo Pellegrini, Castellano said, his expression unreadable. I've been wanting to meet you for a long time, though I imagined different circumstances. Agent Castellano, Carlo replied evenly. I have a witness upstairs who can testify to a 3-year arson conspiracy. She needs federal protection immediately. We received the evidence packets, Castellano said. Forged documents, audio recordings, photographs. It's comprehensive. But I need the originals to verify authenticity. Lucia appeared at Carlo's side, holding the tactical bag with Amy's evidence. USB drive, fireproof box, laptop, all original materials retrieved from Amy Blackson's apartment 90 minutes ago. Castellano took the bag, handed it to a forensic agent, then looked at Lucia with professional respect. You're Lucia Torrente. Former Army intelligence. Impressive extraction skills. Thank you, Lucia said flatly. The forensic agent opened the fireproof box, examining the contents. His eyes widened. Sir, there are bank records here that weren't in the digital files. Account statements showing wire transfers totaling $8.3 million to accounts belonging to Wade and Kessler. This is even more damaging than what was sent to us. Castellano's expression hardened. 8.3 million. How many fires? 23 documented fires, the forensic agent confirmed. Complete paper trail connecting Wade, Kessler, and Hartley to every single one. Outside, Wade was screaming as agents handcuffed him. This is a setup. Pellegrini is a criminal. He fabricated all of this. You're believing a mafia boss over fire department officials. Castellano walked out to face Wade, his voice carrying across the scene. Deputy Chief Wade, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, insurance fraud, attempted murder of Amy Blackson, and corruption. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane. Kessler roared from where agents held him against a vehicle. You're all fools. You think Pellegrini is doing this out of the goodness of his heart? He's destroying us to protect his own operations. We know things, we have information that will ruin everyone in this city. Is that a threat, Chief Kessler? Castellano asked calmly. It's a promise. Kessler screamed. If I go down, I'm taking half the city government with me. Judges, councilmen, inspectors, all of them. You want to arrest me? Fine. But you better arrest everyone I've been paying too. The news cameras captured every word. Kessler had just implicated dozens of officials on live television. Castellano turned to his team. Get these men into federal custody. Separate vehicles, separate interrogation rooms. And someone get me a list of every city official Kessler just threatened. This investigation just got a lot bigger. Agents dragged Wade, Kessler, Hartley, and the 6 other accomplices toward waiting vehicles. The 4 corrupt firefighters were placed in handcuffs, their faces pale with shock. The 2 armed criminals were already secured. Castellano returned to Carlo. You and Ms. Blackson are material witnesses in a federal investigation. We're placing you both under federal protection until trial. I need to see Amy, Carlo said. She needs to know she's safe. Castellano nodded. Let's go. They returned to Amy's room. She was sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face, watching the news coverage on the room's television. Every channel was covering the story. Fire department corruption exposed, chiefs arrested in arson conspiracy, mafia boss saves firefighter's life. Amy Blackson, Castellano said gently. I'm Federal Agent Dominic Castellano. You're safe now. Wade and Kessler are in federal custody. We have your evidence, and it's more than enough to put them away for life. Amy looked at Carlo, fresh tears falling. You saved my life. Twice. Carlo's expression softened slightly. You exposed corruption that killed my brother. This was justice, not mercy. For both of us, Amy whispered. Outside, news helicopters circled, broadcasting the aftermath to millions of viewers. The reckoning had come. And the whole world had witnessed it. For weeks later, the city was still reeling. Carlo sat in his penthouse office, watching the news coverage on 3 different screens. Every major network had covered the trial proceedings, the federal investigation, the systematic dismantling of the largest arson-for-profit conspiracy in the city's history. Fire Chief Raymond Kessler and Deputy Chief Franklin Wade were formally charged today with 47 counts including arson conspiracy, attempted murder, insurance fraud and racketeering, the news anchor announced. Federal prosecutors are seeking life sentences without the possibility of parole. Carlo switched channels. Kenneth Hartley, the arsonist at the center of the conspiracy, faces 23 counts of arson and 3 counts of attempted murder, including the deaths of Sophia Reyes, age 16, Marcus Thompson, age 42, and James Chun, age 57. Prosecutors have filed for the death penalty. Another channel showed footage of 8 firefighters being led into federal court in handcuffs, their uniforms stripped, their badges confiscated. Their faces were hollow with shame and fear. 8 additional firefighters have been arrested for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Fire Battalion Chief Patricia Brennan confirmed that a comprehensive internal investigation is underway, examining every fire response over the past 5 years. The financial scope of the conspiracy dominated headlines. $47 million in insurance fraud. 12 shell companies traced back to Wade and Kessler. 2 insurance investigators arrested for facilitating fraudulent claims. 1 city building inspector charged with accepting bribes to falsify safety reports. The ripples extended further than anyone had anticipated. Kessler, desperate for a reduced sentence, had cooperated fully with federal investigators, naming names, providing documentation of bribes paid to city officials. 3 city councilmen were under investigation. 2 judges had resigned. The deputy mayor was facing corruption charges. The fire department was in crisis. Public trust had evaporated. Calls to 911 had dropped by 30% as citizens questioned whether firefighters would actually respond to their emergencies. The federal government had placed the entire department under oversight pending reforms. But there was one bright spot in the darkness. Carlo switched to the local news channel just as Amy Blackson appeared on screen, standing at a podium in her new uniform. No longer the standard firefighter gear, but the crisp dress uniform of a fire marshal, gold badge gleaming on her chest. "Today we honor someone who embodied the true meaning of courage and integrity," Mayor Richardson said, standing beside Amy. Firefighter Amy Blackson risked everything to expose corruption in her own department. She was beaten, left for dead, and when she survived, she refused to be silenced. "Because of her bravery, we've dismantled a criminal conspiracy that endangered every citizen in this city." The crowd applauded. Amy stood straight, her injuries healed, her face no longer bearing the bruises and cuts from Wade's attack. She looked strong, confident, transformed. "I am proud to announce that Amy Blackson has been promoted to fire marshal, effective immediately," the mayor continued. "She will lead our department's reform efforts, rebuild public trust, and ensure that something like this never happens again." Amy stepped to the microphone, her voice clear and steady. "I joined the fire department because I wanted to save lives. When I discovered that some within our ranks were setting fires instead of fighting them, profiting from destruction instead of preventing it, I knew I had to act. The path wasn't easy. I was betrayed by people I trusted, beaten and left to die by my own chiefs. But I'm standing here today because one person chose to do the right thing when it mattered most." She didn't say Carlo's name. Didn't need to. Everyone knew the story. The Mafia boss who saved a firefighter's life. The unlikely alliance that exposed systemic corruption. To the firefighters who still serve with honor, who risk their lives every day for strangers, who uphold the oath we all took, I promise you this: we will rebuild. We will restore the trust that was broken. And we will make sure that the badge we wear means something again. The applause was thunderous. Carlo turned off the screens and stood, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, Dante's grave held fresh flowers, placed there by Carlo just that morning. For the first time in 14 years, Carlo had been able to visit his brother's resting place without rage consuming him. Justice had finally come. Not the way the system intended, not through proper channels and official investigations, but through an alliance between enemies, a mafia boss and a firefighter who both understood that sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking every rule. His phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Thank you for everything, AB." Carlo didn't reply. He simply looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Some alliances were meant to be temporary. Some debts could never be repaid with words. Amy Blackson would rebuild the fire department. Carlo would return to his world, to his empire, to the shadows where men like him belonged. But both of them knew the truth: they had saved each other. And in doing so, they'd saved a city from the corruption that had been burning it from within. The aftermath had come. Justice had been served. And for once, the good guys had won. Carlo stood outside fire department headquarters, hands in the pockets of his tailored coat, watching firefighters move in and out of the building. It had been 6 weeks since the arrests, 6 weeks since the siege, 6 weeks since everything changed. He'd requested this meeting through Lucia, who'd contacted Amy through secure channels. One final conversation. Then they'd go their separate ways, back to their respective worlds. Amy emerged from the main entrance in her fire marshal uniform, badge gleaming in the afternoon sun. She'd gained weight back, her face no longer gaunt and pale. The physical wounds had healed. Carlo wondered about the other kind. "You came," Amy said, surprise evident in her voice. "I said I would," Carlo replied. They walked together to a small park across the street, away from the cameras, away from the curious eyes of firefighters who would recognize them both. They sat on a bench overlooking the city skyline, two people who should have been enemies but had become something else entirely. "How are you?" Carlo asked. "Busy," Amy said with a slight smile. "Reforming an entire department is harder than fighting fires. I fired 12 more firefighters who were taking payoffs, restructured our inspection protocols, implemented new oversight systems. It's exhausting, but it's necessary." "You're doing good work," Carlo said simply. Amy turned to look at him, really look at him. "Why did you want to meet?" "The trial doesn't start for another month. We don't need to coordinate testimony yet." Carlo took a breath, preparing for the words he'd rehearsed 100 times. "I'm retiring." Amy blinked. "Retiring? From what?" "From everything," Carlo said. "From the criminal operations, from the empire, from being Carlo Pellegrini." He reached into his coat and pulled out a business card, handed it to Amy. "My legal name is Alessandro Russo. Legitimate businessman, real estate developer, philanthropist. That's who I'm going to be from now on." Amy stared at the card, then at Carlo, at Alessandro, with shock written across her face. "You're leaving? Walking away from everything you built?" "I made a promise to my brother at his grave," Alessandro said quietly. "That I would never let corruption go unpunished. That I would never be powerless again. I kept that promise. Kessler and Wade are going to prison for life because we exposed them. The city is safer because of what we did." He paused. "But I also realized something. I spent 14 years building an empire on the same corruption I claimed to hate. I paid off cops, firefighters, officials. I became part of the system that killed Dante." "You're not like them," Amy said urgently. "You saved my life. You risked everything to expose the truth." "Maybe," Alessandro acknowledged. "Or maybe I'm exactly like them, just pointed in a different direction. Either way, I can't keep living this life. Not after what we did together. You showed me that courage isn't about power or control. It's about doing what's right even when it costs you everything." Amy's eyes filled with tears. "You're giving up your empire because of me?" "I'm giving it up because of us," Alessandro corrected. "Because you trusted me when you had every reason not to. Because we proved that justice doesn't care about badges or positions, only about people willing to stand up for what's right." He looked at the city skyline. "I want to be that person. The person Dante would have been proud of, not the one who profited from the same corruption that killed him." Amy wiped her eyes, then extended her hand. "Alessandro Russo. It's nice to meet you." Alessandro took her hand, felt the strength in her grip, the calluses from years of firefighting. "Fire Marshal Blackson. The honor is mine." They sat in silence for a moment, two people who'd walked through fire together and emerged transformed. "You saved my life," Amy said finally. "Twice. Once in that alley, and once when you believed in me enough to risk everything. I don't know how to thank you for that." "You already have," Alessandro said. "You gave me a reason to be better than I was. You showed me that redemption is possible, even for men like me." He stood, preparing to leave. "You're going to do great things as fire marshal. The city is lucky to have you." Amy stood as well, then did something unexpected. She pulled Alessandro into a brief hug. "Wherever you go, whatever you do next, know that you made a difference. You honored your brother's memory. You saved lives. That matters more than anything else." Alessandro returned the embrace, feeling something break loose in his chest, some weight he'd carried for 14 years finally lifting. "Take care of yourself, Amy. And keep fighting the good fight." "You too, Alessandro." They separated, two warriors who'd fought together and won, now walking different paths toward the same destination, redemption. Alessandro walked away from fire department headquarters, away from his past, toward whatever future Alessandro Russo would build. Behind him, Amy returned to her work, to rebuilding a department, to proving that integrity could survive even the deepest corruption. They'd saved each other in that alley. But more than that, they'd saved themselves. Some alliances changed you forever. Some partnerships proved that enemies could become heroes, that justice transcended every boundary society drew. Carlo Pellegrini had died in that siege. Alessandro Russo had been born in its aftermath. And Amy Blackson, the firefighter who'd refused to be silenced, had become Fire Marshal Amy Blackson, the woman who'd expose corruption no matter the cost. Their goodbye was final. Their impact was eternal. Alessandro Russo sat in his office on the 23rd floor of the Russo Development Building, a legitimate enterprise he'd built over the years as a front that had now become his reality. The office was clean, modern, professional. No traces of Carlo Pellegrini remained except for one thing. On his desk sat a silver frame containing a photograph of a 14-year-old boy with dark eyes and a bright smile. Dante. Frozen forever at the age when corrupt firefighters had let him die. Alessandro picked up the frame, running his thumb across the glass. For 14 years, looking at this photograph had filled him with rage, with helplessness, with a burning need for vengeance that had shaped every decision he'd made. But today, for the first time since Dante's funeral, Alessandro felt something different. Peace. I kept my promise, Alessandro said quietly to his brother's image. I made them pay. All of them. Kessler, Wade, Hartley, everyone who profits from letting people die. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. And I saved someone, Dante. I saved Amy's life when corrupt firefighters would have taken it. I didn't fail this time. The city skyline stretched beyond his window, the same city that had taken his brother, the same city he'd controlled through fear and power for so long. But it looked different now. Cleaner, somehow. Full of possibility instead of corruption. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Alessandro glanced at the screen. Fire Marshal Amy Blackson announces comprehensive reform package, new oversight systems, independent corruption hotline, community trust initiative. Alessandro smiled slightly and clicked the article. A photograph showed Amy at a press conference, surrounded by firefighters in dress uniforms, Battalion Chief Patricia Brennan standing beside her with pride evident on her face. Today marks a new chapter for our department, Amy was quoted as saying. We've learned that silence protects corruption, but courage exposes it. Every firefighter in this city will now undergo ethics training. Every inspection will be independently verified. And any citizen who suspects wrongdoing will have a direct line to report it without fear of retaliation. We will rebuild the trust that was broken. We will honor the oath we took to protect this city. The article went on to detail the reforms: mandatory rotation of inspection teams to prevent long-term corruption relationships, body cam requirements for all fire investigators, federal oversight for the next 3 years, and a victim compensation fund established with a recovered $47 million in insurance fraud. 3 families who'd lost loved ones in the conspiracy fires would finally receive justice, not just legal but financial recognition of their suffering. Alessandro set down his phone and looked at Dante's photograph again. She's doing good work, little brother. Making sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. I think you'd like her. She's got your courage, your belief that the system can be better. Across the city, Amy stood in her new office at Fire Department headquarters, looking at a wall she dedicated to the 3 victims of the arson conspiracy. Sophia Reyes, 16. Marcus Thompson, 42. James Chin, 57. Their photographs stared back at her, a constant reminder of why her work mattered. She'd invited their families to the department, personally apologized for the institution's failure, promised them that their loved ones' deaths would mean something. That change would come from tragedy. The families had wept. Amy had wept with them. And then they'd work together to establish the reform package, ensuring that victims' voices shaped the department's future. Amy's assistant knocked on her door. Fire Marshal? You have a call from the Federal Arson Task Force. Agent Castellano wants to brief you on additional arrests. Put him through, Amy said, sitting at her desk. The reforms were working. The corruption investigation had expanded to 3 other cities, exposing similar conspiracies in departments across the country. What had started with one firefighter refusing to be silenced had become a nationwide reckoning. As Amy took the call, discussing next steps in the investigation, she thought briefly of Alessandro. Of Carlo Pellegrini, the Mafia boss who'd saved her life and then walked away from everything he'd built to honor his brother's memory. She hoped he'd found peace. She hoped he'd built something legitimate and good with the second chance they'd given each other. Meanwhile, in his office, Alessandro opened his laptop and reviewed development plans for affordable housing in the Bronson district, the same neighborhood where Dante had died. Legitimate business, legitimate purpose, using his resources to rebuild instead of control. His phone rang. Lucia Torrente. The last of the operations have been transferred to legitimate management, Lucia reported. All illegal activities shut down, all personnel transitioned to legal employment or retired with severance. Carlo Pellegrini no longer exists in any operational capacity. Good, Alessandro said. And you, Lucia? What will you do now? I've accepted a position as head of security for your development company, Lucia replied. Legitimate work pays less, but it sleeps better. Alessandro smiled. Welcome to the new life. He ended the call and looked one last time at Dante's photograph. 2 people had been transformed in that alley less than 2 months ago. Carlo Pellegrini had died and Alessandro Russo had been born. Amy Blackson had been betrayed and Fire Marshal Amy Blackson had risen from the ashes. Both had discovered that justice doesn't come from positions or power. It comes from courage. From unlikely alliances. From people willing to risk everything to do what's right, regardless of which side of the law they stand on. The city was healing. The fire department was reforming. Corrupt officials were in prison. And somewhere in the city, 2 transformed souls were building something better from the ruins of what had been. Justice had been served. Not through the system, but despite it. Sometimes the most unexpected alliances create the most profound change. Alessandro placed Dante's photograph back on his desk, finally able to look at his brother's smile without pain. Rest easy, Dante, he whispered. Your death wasn't in vain. And neither was my life. The transformation was complete. If you've made it to the end and haven't subscribed yet, this is the perfect time to become part of this family. Also, do tell me in the comments what struck you most about the story. What was the greatest lesson it left you? I try to read all the comments, and I love knowing how these stories move you. Finally, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed it, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and even more intriguing than you can imagine. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.